This video is going to be a walkthrough for Code Practice Question 1, and it also is going to review some important concepts that we use in programming. We are going to be using the environment, the replet, so we're going to open that. And we have a program stem possibly already started here. We also have, more importantly, our text file already created here, okay? And if you guys were doing this outside this environment, you would have to have the text file inside your project folder or have a pathway to the text file indicated. But the goal here is to read in all of these temperatures and then eventually find the average of them. And both of those things introduces or reinforces something called a counting variable and a summing variable, which was in your summative. So because I want to count the number of temperatures, I'm going to create a variable that's just called count, or number of temperatures for the whatever data we're having. And then I want to also total all the temperatures, so total value of all the temps, or total of the temps. And I'm going to assign them 0 to start with. And then we're going to use our typical processing that we use with a text file. I am not as comfortable with this in Python as other languages, and so I'm going to go back to the lesson pages, and I'm kind of trying to model what you should do. And I'm going to look for that data on how do I read a file. So if I scroll down, we have this kind of like a template right here. I'm going to copy that and bring it over to our replet environment and paste my code here. And then I'm going to look at a couple of things. I copied over that code, but if I look, I already have an open file path right here. And they're modeling here the idea of using a file path, which is excellent, although your file path really doesn't exist here because the file is inside the project folder. But if you had to get a file path from a file that was on your C drive or on your computer's drive, you would just put the file path in right here. So I don't need this line because I've already opened the file. And then I already have in file.readLine, the first line is read in, so I don't need that line of code. But now this looks like the rest of the template that I need, and I'm going to run it just to see if it runs. As you're executing this, run it frequently to see that every step that you make or every step that you create kind of executes. And then if you're a little bit paranoid about losing your code, which I would be, I would open up a Notepad++ window, and I would frequently copy this code and paste it over to a Notepad++ window just so that you have it as kind of a backup. So that's a good practice to get into. So we actually have most of what we need here. I just need to count how many of these we have, and then I need to total them. And that's going to happen in my counting variable for number of temps and then my total temps. Okay, so and I don't necessarily like the names of those variable names, but we're going to go with them for now. So every time I read in a line, okay, I read in a line right here, and it printed that first line. And so I need to count it. I want to do this before line 19 because line 19 is reading in the next line. And so I'm going to count this line, and I'm going to say, and actually I just decided that I'm going to change my variable to temp count. So then I know how many, that makes more sense to me because it's a counting variable. And a counting variable counts by typically ones in our programs. So we're just going to increment that by 1. And then the total value of the temps is going to be assigned. Remember, the single equal sign is an assignment, temps plus, not 1, but plus, and this is where it gets a little tricky, line. But if I try to do this, I think the program's going to blow up on me because line itself gives us error, and you're going to run across this error again and again and again. And so you want to kind of keep in mind, what does this error message mean? Unsupported operand type S for plus int and str. Okay, so it's saying that it doesn't know what to do with the addition sign, the plus, when I have an integer and a string. So it's treating this line value as a string because I read it in right here Okay, I read it in from the data file, and it reads in right now as a string. This is a string value. In order to work with it in a calculation, I have to convert it to a data type. The other thing is it's taking a guess. It says int and string. It doesn't know that we really want to work with this as a float. This is a floating point number. It's taking its lead from the fact that I assigned it a value right here of 0. So maybe I should assign it 0.0 because that's a float. So now if I run it, now it says, oh, well, I still can't do this because I'm trying to convert a float plus a string, and I can't add a float plus a string. So we need to use that type casting. We need to cast the value that we read in to a float, and then it should be able to execute. Now I don't have any output actually printing to determine if that executed, so outside my while loop, and I would put it outside after closing the file, I am just going to print the temperature count. So it's the number of data pieces that I have, because it's not always going to be temperature, just to kind of model that. And we are going to put str temp count, so I have to cast that as a string. And then lastly, we are going to print a total value of data pieces. In this case, they are temperatures. I could put temperature in there, but just to model something a little bit different. And we're going to do total temps. And hopefully our code is going to run without any issues. But of course we have a problem. So I probably have a typo. Total value of data pieces, total temps, name error. So what did I call it? Total temps, I did a typo. I misspelled it or just didn't type it correctly. So cross our fingers that that works. And now we have an integer for number of pieces of data and the total value. Now, oftentimes we might ask you to find the average of something like this, and so then I would strongly recommend that you assign it to a different variable. Other programmers might not. Average temp is then going to be assigned total temps, the temperatures divided by the temperature count, and then I would print the, and actually I would take this calculation and I would put it prior to the print statement, because I kind of like to put all of my output for my program, so to speak, in one area. So I'm kind of organizing. I've got all my calculations and my work, and then I'm going to output my calculations down here. And last but not least, we are going to output the average temp and see if that works. And so you've got an example here of using a counting variable using... Okay, I just messed up my recording there for a second, so I don't know where I left off 100%. So we've got an example of a counting variable, we got an example of a summing variable, and then we have like an average calculation. So let's see if this executes, and it does. And so we've got our program executing. That kind of wraps the 7.5 Code Practice 1, where you're working with a data file. We're probably going to use components of this for our next project, and so you might want to copy this and save it for the next one.